Welcome to this week's show, MLB This Week. It's the MLB This Week podcast. The League Championship Series are taking shape. A whole lot of that talk and a whole lot of baseball talk on this edition of MLB This Week. Hello, and welcome to this edition of MLB This Week Podcast. My name is Rich.
And I'm Gary.
And Gary, we're heating up here in the American League and the National League Championship Series. 2 games in the books, and a surprising 2-0 lead for both teams.
Yes, Rich, it certainly is. And, everything happened so quickly. It just seems like just the other day that the division series was still going on. And now they're like major ancient history as we are 2 games into the league championship series. And as you say, the Royals grabbed a 2-0 lead over the Blue Jays in quite a impressive fashion, coming from behind and grabbing leads. And I really thought in game 2 that the Blue Jays were going to steal one. And boy, all of a sudden the Royals, boom, 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 boom. And they've got a lead, and they didn't look back. And of course, with the bullpen that they have, it's just incredible how they can shut you down. And in the National League side, the New York Mets, my team, it's very exciting here. We're in a frenzy, and they're up 2-0 thanks to some strong pitching and a little bit of hitting, a little clutch hitting, jumping on the Cubs starters early in the game, and beat their 2 top starters, Lester and Arrieta. And this is what's good about this team. They still got another ace going in game 3, and the Cubs are going to have to dig deep and get their 3rd starter and 4th starter up there. So a good chance for the Mets. They're in a good position to keep going, as is the Royals. And, of course, the Royals and the Blue Jays are playing tonight as we record this, or when we're just about finished, they should be starting at 8 o'clock. So that's going to be a good game to watch and to check out. So I hope everybody will tune into that. But it's been a very exciting series. And, what can I say? It's very exciting when your team is in it, as you know. And it's just been a crazy time here in New York.
Yeah, I could imagine Mets fans crawling out of the woodwork. And where were they last year and the year before that? That's what you start to notice with a team becoming successful. Everybody wants to jump on the bandwagon, and they stay on that bandwagon while they're successful. It's amazing that a lot of people love to celebrate when a team does well, but then when they go back down, similar to the Phillies years ago, when they hit into the playoffs, it took a while, but a lot of people jumped on the bandwagon. Well, all those people have since fell off. But as you said, yeah, it's a great time for celebration in New York and tri-state area, up there in North Jersey. A lot of Mets fans all around the region there. And up in Toronto, I would say they're in shock because the Blue Jays were supposed to do much better. They do play a game 3 tonight up in Toronto, and it's a must-win game for them. Game 3, when you're down 0-2, as are the Cubs, game 3 is a must-win game for that team, or they can just write it home. They're not going to win that series. They'd have to run the table straight if they lose game 3 after losing the first 2 games, and it would be next to impossible. But the bigger story with the Cubs is nobody's hitting the ball. You've got several of their best players under 200 average. Schwarber has hit a couple home runs in the series. But he's batting an incredible 125. If you look at Rizzo, he's batting 167. And one of their best players, Bryant, not doing much better either.
Well, Rich, you know the old adage, good pitching will stop good hitting, and we've been seeing that in this series as the Mets have just dominated the Cubs on the mound. Matt Harvey went out and threw a terrific game the other night, even took a shot off the arm. And just as an update, he still has a swollen tricep there, so they may have to push him back the next start, but we're hoping they don't have to get back to him again till the World Series here in New York. But he was just outstanding in game one, and then they came back with the young kid last night, Noah Syndergaard, who just was blowing people away, and just got fantastic stuff, mixed it up. And the thing with this Mets staff is they're not just power throwers, they're pitchers. They know how to mix it in there, and they keep learning. And I was on a show the last week, Rising Apple podcast, and I made the point that the experience that these kids are getting at this level, at this time of year, is priceless, and you can't get this anywhere else. And Terry Collins, the manager, has done a terrific job throwing these kids out there, and they have just been sensational. And of course, what can you say? They've been getting key hitting from Curtis Granderson, and Daniel Murphy has been just fantastic in this series. And of course, Jeurys Familia at the end to close out the games, he's been fantastic. So they've had it clicking. They're playing good baseball, and you know they just shut the Cubs down. They've made the plays on defense. They've just shut them down, and 2 more games to go for the Mets to shut them, keep them down, and they'll be in the World Series and probably meeting. Who knows? At this point, you'd have to say the Royals, because they just look. Wow, I mean. Toronto can bash the ball with the best of them, but wow. I mean, Kansas City just came back the other night with hit upon hit upon hit, and didn't really kill them. But, it was a single, a double, and just kept driving them in. And boy, that was fun to watch. So they're in a good position right now.
Yes, they are. And as you said, Granderson batting .333 in the series here with the Cubs. Murphy, an incredible .429 with 4 home runs. You can't say too much more about him. I'm surprised a little bit about Cespedes. He hasn't even woken up yet in this series. He's batting .125, but other guys around him have stepped up and filled that void for power, so to speak.
Yeah, it's been Granderson and Murphy. David Wright is not doing that much. He's had 2 hits, 2 big hits, though, I'll have to say. He drove in 2 big runs against Kershaw, I believe it was, in the NLDS, and really got them going last night, though. Hit a big double to drive in Granderson in the first inning, and that really started to got him off. And then Murphy hit the 2-run homer, and that's all they really needed at that point. But, nobody's really hitting. Lucas Duda hasn't done a thing in this whole series, and Cespedes is striking out a lot. He has not done a lot in this, not in the whole postseason. He had a couple of homers in the Dodger series, but really hasn't done much. And it's kind of a frightening thought if these guys get hot, or can just get started a little bit, they'll be rolling, then they'll be really tough to beat. But the pitch is the thing. Sorry.
Yes, it is. The pitching, as you said, is carrying the day most of the time in these series. I'm looking at the Kansas City Royals here. I don't think I could have named you 4 Royals if we started out the show tonight talking about the Royals. That's sort of a team that's still has many players that aren't household names to it.
Yeah, but we learned a little bit about them last year, and they have some really good players. Alex Gordon is a good contact hitter, and a clutch hitter. Hosmer is a good hitter. Used the whole field. Perez is a good power hitter, and boy, he takes a beating back there. I mean, he's always getting smacked in the head, or balls thrown in the dirt, catching him in places. He takes a beating behind the home plate, but he's tough as nails, that guy. So, I mean, and they've got a good, solid team, and that's it. That's what they do. They use the team, and they have that terrific bullpen in the 7th, 8th, and 9th inning. And if they can get a lead, they can usually shut you down with that bullpen. And and then that's the way everybody's trying to go now. But it's not easy. But they were one of the first to do that, and just playing terrific ball right now.
Yes, indeed. And the series are coming up with much more TV viewers. Baseball playoffs so far up 22% from previous years. The average audience is more than 4.2 million watching baseball, and that's the highest since 2010. Of course, baseball sort of got lucky. Some of the biggest markets in the country are involved here, New York and Los Angeles, and even Chicago. So that's translating into more viewers, a lot more people tuned into these series, and that's pretty good for baseball as well. It's sort of brought some fans back into the game of baseball here.
And, I don't know how the TV rights work in Canada, whether they're picking up the Fox or if they have their own equivalent, but you got a whole country, watching up there and rooting. So it's very exciting. It's going to be good for baseball. And I know people will say, "Oh yeah, you're happy because your Mets are in it," but you know what? Like you said, it's a New York team. It's unexpected teams. We expected the Cubs to be better, but we expected them to be fighting for a wild card, which they did. Yeah. We also expected the Mets to be fighting for a wild card, and they won a division and took care of the division series, took care of their rivals in LA. So but it's like you said, it's big markets that are in it, but teams that that have a story. The Mets, you weren't expecting to get there, and it's been a while, so there's some excitement there. The Cubbies, everybody knows their story. They haven't won in 108 years or something, a World Series. Haven't been in a World Series since 1945. So there's a story there. Kansas City was in the World Series last year, and they lost to the Giants, but they want to get back, and they haven't won since 85, I think. And really Toronto too, they haven't won since 93 and have really not been too much in the playoffs since then. So there's a lot of stories going on here, and it's 4 different teams, and I think the fans have turned out to see that.
Yes, they have. They're back into baseball. Of course, baseball in October can be a little tricky, and we found that out with the New York weather in the past couple nights, going into the 30s at the stadium. Some interesting weather to watch here in Toronto. It's supposed to rain the next several days up there in Toronto, but surprise, they have that covered with the dome. So it's going to be pristine conditions for that game. But down in New York, it was a little chilly. You could see all of the Cubs dressed in their winter hats and coats. And even Joe Madden, he looked like he was ready to go out and build a snowman out there at City.
Yeah, he certainly did. He was, he came from Tampa Bay, so I guess he liked that weather. But it was cold, but if you dress for it, it was comfortable. Our old friend Barry, who used to do co-host with me on Mets Musings, he actually went to the game last night and said that it was cold, but if you dress for it and you're prepared, you're okay. And I think that's the main thing. And got to be honest, I don't think a lot of those people at that game felt the cold last night.
Yeah, it was a lot of supercharged atmosphere. As the series moves on to Chicago, a little bit more baseball-ish out there. Highs of 73 during the day. It's going to go down to around 56 at night, maybe even higher than that. So the next 3 games out in Chicago should be, or 2, as it were, if the Mets ended up sweeping the Cubs, it's going to be a little more seasonal. But that leads me right into our next story, Gary, is do you remember when baseball used to be wrapping up around now? When the World Series was over by the 19th or 20th of October, what happened with baseball? If it goes 7 games now in the World Series, they're going to be into November.
Well, Rich, they used to have 10 teams in the league, and you won the league and you went right to the World Series. So the season would end on the 1st or 2nd of October, and the 4th you'd be playing the World Series. So it'd be over by, as you say, by now. But, expansion, they expanded. They added layers of playoffs, and it's a money thing. It's a TV thing, and I'm sure they could get these things a little quicker. But, they want to have every night. They want to have a game on. So they keep you entertained and hooked into baseball. And I guess the only thing to do really would be to consider shortening the season.
Yeah,
or bringing back. And, Rich, too, when I was a kid, they used to play double headers on Sunday, quite a few of them.
Yeah.
And that really would help, too, if they did that. I think I figured it out one time. If every team played one doubleheader a month throughout the season, just one, they could start like 2 weeks earlier or something like, or they could end 2 weeks earlier, and that would pretty much take up a lot of the playoff time.
Yeah, I remember back just in the 80s, it used to be at least 2 scheduled doubleheaders per year, and that seemed to do the job. That, not the individual games necessarily, although now they would probably want to go to that, a day-night type of doubleheader. But these were single admission doubleheaders, and it cleared the schedule up nicely, and it kind of got things out of the way a little sooner for the season. So if they don't shorten the season, which I don't think they're going to shorten the season, I think they would do well to maybe add a couple doubleheaders to their schedule.
Yeah, I don't know if the owners would go for that, though, because they don't, they want that admission money. And as you said, they could go to a day night, but then I don't think the players like those as much. I think they'd rather play a regular doubleheader and get it over with. And a lot of it has to do with the bargaining agreement. And, the players didn't like the doubleheaders. It's a lot of work, I guess. And so that was the demise of them, that you really don't see them as much. But it was pretty staple when I was a kid, and especially on the holidays. There was always a Memorial Day doubleheader. July the 4th, there always seemed to be a doubleheader. It kind of went away.
Yeah, it lost favor as to some things in the game over time, but maybe we'll see it back in the name of getting the season done at least into the last week of October before we get rain and snow and things like that. It depends where a team's from, but in the Northeast, you could considerably have snow towards the end of October, as they did out towards Syracuse and Niagara Falls in the last couple days.
And look, you got a team from New York and Chicago, so you're going to get some cold weather somewhere. And Rich, if we could go back a second to the just going back to the LCS briefly and the TV coverage. I don't know what you think about it, but to me, it's been pretty bad so far. I mean, you have Carl Ripken, and I say that sarcastically because he keeps calling William Flores. And then Ernie Johnson last night said that the Cubs were leading the game 4-1 when it was clearly the Mets were ahead 4-1. And he had Syndergaard pitching for Chicago. I mean, it's just a mess. It's sort of a madhouse. The Harold Reynolds is probably one of the worst announcers I've ever heard in my life, and changes position on plays like I change my socks every day. You know, if somebody else has a better idea, it's just been bad, and it's really a shame that we have these national coverage games, and the coverage is pretty bad. I mean, they were. I wish I would have wrote it down. It was a play yesterday. Then, they brought in a relief pitcher, and I think he threw 4 pitches before they even decided to announce that he was in the game on the air. It was the Mets game. I happened to know because I, saw the number and standing on the mound, but there was no graphic and no announcement. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, they said, Familia has a 2-1 count on the guy. And I'm saying, Familia's in the game. When did he step in? It's just things like that. And I noticed on the American League Series too, that's been a little bit tighter than the TBS crew. But Harold Reynolds is just, to me, is so very annoying. So I guess I'll let that go. But the TBS is, I just think it's been terrible.
Yeah, it has been. In fact, I didn't even know that was Cal Ripken announcing. They don't really announce or put up on the screen who is talking most of the time, and I had to spend half the night to figure out who is that terrible announcer and Cal Ripken. We haven't heard much from him over the years. And certainly to put him in a broadcast booth where he's making so many errors, and just his tone and speech during the game is not very thrilling and exciting, and not very positive most of the time. He's a very negative announcer. I can be a bit negative at times, but when you're broadcasting a national game, I don't think you should bring up all the negatives that you can in something, which he's done throughout this series. So, yeah, I agree with you. TBS didn't ruin the baseball series on the broadcast, but they didn't help it either with adding, especially Harold Reynolds. He's just not – he might be a good post-game analyst, but he's not a good in-game analyst, in my opinion.
I couldn't agree more with you on that.
So even Fox is now stepping into the play here. I think they have the World Series coming up, and they're going to have none other than A-Rod in studio, along with Pete Rose at the same desk, and that's inviting trouble, in my opinion.
But it's going to be good TV. Maybe it's going to be interesting, and I don't. That's another thing. I don't know what station it's on. Is it on the Fox Sports 1? Is it on Fox? Is it what time? They didn't. I mean, here in New York, we were very disappointed. They don't show you, when they go to line up and everything, because they're too busy talking in California in their studio. So we didn't get any of the introductions. You don't see any of the first pitches. Years ago when NBC had it, the networks had it, they used to let you see that stuff, and that's the kind of stuff you want to see, because you can't spend $300 for a standing room only ticket and go to a game. Let me see it on television then, instead of these talking heads in the studio somewhere telling me about a team that I've watched 160 games on, and that they've watched film maybe, for 5 days.
Yeah, they're not as familiar with the different players and things like that. And just like you said, Cal Ripken's comments, Harold Reynolds, it just doesn't add up to a quality broadcast.
And it's shocking, because these are national broadcasts, and to have such low quality, even Ernie Johnson, I mean, the guy sounds like he should be, in a I don't know, call him bingo numbers or something, he's in a senior home or something, because he's just so and you know, a small quirky thing that I noticed because I'm a weirdo, but they're using headsets microphone, and he's got an old microphone, not an old microphone, but he's got a microphone on a stand. And I don't, unless maybe he just doesn't like the headset microphones or something. But it just struck me as very odd that he's got to bend over this microphone all the time, and these guys, you know, because they got the headsets on, you know,
and they're looking at him like, what the heck are you doing, Ernie?
And even Ron Darling, who we love here in New York, but he's not the same announcer when he does the national games. He's not as good. And part of the reason could be because in New York, he's got two great partners in Gary Cohen and Keith Hernandez. And I think Keith Hernandez is actually probably the better. And I think Ron Darling works better with him than he does with Bob Ripken Jr. there. But I know it's Cal. I'm just saying, you know, because he can't seem to get anybody's name right. So, but yeah, it's kind of disappointing that the coverage is so bad. But what are you going to do?
Yep, I think they should go. Somebody has a suggestion to have maybe both top announcers for each team in the booth, and then at least you would have somewhat of a quality broadcast to listen to for both teams, that is. Talking more about the scheduling of the different games so far, I would have liked to have seen a day game between the Mets and the Cubs, or the Mets and the Dodgers sprinkled into the mix there. And so far, we haven't seen any day games out of New York, though we've seen a couple in the American League Series.
It's all TV. It's all money. They know the big market. They want to get the New York and the Chicago market in the evening because they know that's the prime time. You know, unfortunately, Kansas City and Toronto. But, you know, let's face it. If you're going to look at big markets and the television, it's New York and Chicago. It's not going to be Toronto and Kansas City.
Yep. So looking on with the World Series schedule here, it would start on October 27th. And then we would go to the 28th for Game 2. The weekend would hold Games 3, 4, and 5, October 31st. Saturday night would be Game 4. And this could last conceivably to November 4th if it went to a Game 7, Gary. So whole lot of baseball left here. It's only October 19th as we're doing this show. So we've got a good long way to go. A lot more fun, a lot more great plays, I'm sure, are going to be made. And you have a nice gesture story here by one of the teams so far coming out of the playoffs.
Well, you know, the Houston Astros, Rich, they got knocked out of the American League Division Series and lost to those who did they lose to? I think, see, it's such a long time ago, and yet it wasn't. They lose to the Royals?
I believe so.
Yes, I believe so. Well, anyway, their bullpen catcher, Javier Bracamonte, he showed an unbelievable act of class and sportsmanship after the game was over, in which they were eliminated. He dug into his giant bag of gear and emptied it out to the fans in Royal Stadium, Kauffman Stadium. He threw his hat, batting gloves, baseballs, his chest protector, his shin guards, Tootsie Pops, and every baseball he could find in the bullpen. Threw them out and tossed them up to the fans in the stadium, and wished the Royals and their fans good luck the rest of the way. And he was seen earlier in the series playing catch with kids in the stands, which is also something very nice and something you don't see. He is Bracamonte. He's 45 years old. He's been the Astros bullpen catcher for 15 seasons. He's a former infielder who, for a time, was signed by the New York Yankees out of their Venezuelan baseball academy. Obviously, never made it, but caught on as a bullpen coach and a catcher, and has done a great job. And what a great gesture! And there we go again. There's another good thing about the game of baseball. No PEDs here. Just a nice story about a nice man who loves the game and wants to share it with others. So our hats are off to Mr. Bracamonte of the Houston Astros.
Very cool story there. I didn't see that go across the wires. And that's another thing, that a lot of these good stories sneak under the radar. They don't make it onto national broadcasts and things like that, because I guess the media doesn't think that it deserves a lot of attention. But yeah, that's an awesome story. A way to pay the fans back, of course, and just something nice for the game there overall. It's a great story. I'm so glad you found it, Gary, for this show, MLB This Week.
Well, it was my pleasure to find it, Rich. And, with the playoffs in full motion now, and there's lots of great stories out there, and people can listen in to lots of great baseball podcasts if they go to baseballtalkradio.com and listen and tune in to the live feed there, the live stream, as well as many different kind of podcasts on the network. So go check it out at baseballtalkradio.com and check us out every week here at MLBThisWeek.com, and drop us a line at talk@MLBThisWeek and let us know how we're doing and if you'd like to see anything different.
Yeah, we've had a lot of our listeners stay on with us even in through the playoffs here, and tune in year round, because we're planning to make this show last all winter long. We're going to do it at least once a month, so tune in. Don't disconnect us from your downloads, because we'll be coming at you with some great baseball talk, some guests over the next couple months in the off season after the playoffs. And Gary, our next story up here is a story similar to the blog empires out there. I have to think, over in Chicago, there was a gentleman that published his own magazine with the Cubs, a low-budget baseball magazine, for about $2 a copy, which he sold right outside of Wrigley Field. In the beginning of the season, the Cubs rather didn't have a problem with it, but since they've made the playoffs, they've made him move across the street from the stadium, saying he can no longer sell his Chicago baseball magazine on a public sidewalk of the stadium. He was ordered to move across the street, which is considerably less profitable location for him. The dispute stems from a lawsuit that the gentleman, whose name is Matt Smurge, filed against the city after a police officer ticketed him during the April home opener in Chicago. And he's almost going against the city and the Cubs. Silver lining to the story, just yesterday and today, actually, it was announced that he can remain to sell his publication. He does have an amendment right to do this, maybe not on the grounds of Wrigley Field, because they do own that as a private business, but certainly he can still sell the publication in the area of the stadium, which kind of gives your faith back into the public good and the Constitution of First Amendment rights.
Yeah, it's an interesting story. I don't know how he gets away with some of the stuff. There are copyright laws as well, and I noticed in the story that they had a picture of him, and he was holding some of the magazines, and there was pictures of Cubs players on it, and I don't know how he's going to circumvent that, because there again, there are MLB copyright issues, and everything is, I mean, you can take a picture, but it gets sneaky when you start to sell it. So they don't, and when we've been through that with MLB.
Yeah,
So
there's definitely a fine line, but if you look at the bloggers out there, you could argue that a lot of blogs are just digital. In fact, magazines, you're not
magazines.
selling them, but they're still, displaying certain things, talking about the game. If you remember years ago, they used to run a message, and I believe they still do, no accounts, descriptions of the game. Well, now baseball welcomes accounts and descriptions of the game because it brings more fans into talking about baseball. So I think we've seen that announcement that used to go on during every baseball game toned down a whole lot. In fact, I don't think I remember hearing it that much at all this year anymore.
Yeah, I don't either, but I think the main thing is they don't want you videotaping now and showing it for profit. And that's the thing with him. He's making a profit from it. I don't know. I'm all for letting him sell whatever he can sell, but I think that's the difference. He is a vendor, and that's probably, if anything, what they're going to get him on. Because I'm sure you have to have a license to vend on the public streets, and they're in a unique situation in Chicago because they are in the middle of a neighborhood, so there are public streets all around there, and so that's a bigger issue there than it would be, say, at Citi Field, because it's surrounded by parking lots owned by the city of New York, and it's easier to throw somebody off on that. And you really don't, thinking back now, you really don't see a lot of, I used to see it when I was a kid. You went to the ballpark, you'd see a lot more of the vendors on the sidewalks and stuff. You don't see too much anymore. So they police that, but he is on a city street, and it's going to be interesting. And look, he's going to make his money now in the playoffs. And then I wouldn't be surprised if he drops the charges or drops his case after the playoffs, because he'll make probably a lot of money, and $2. I mean, it looked like he had color pictures and stuff. I didn't see the whole magazine, just whatever he was holding. But wow, how does he put that together? And I think he said he sold like 1,000 copies a game or something.
Yeah,
that's a lot of work and printing and all of that. So wow, good luck to him.
It is a lot of jingle. I know those magazines aren't cheap to print.
Yeah.
So interesting story there. One guy going out publishing his own magazine. We'll have to keep an eye on that as the series progresses. And the First Amendment stepped in and spoke for him, saying they could not ban him from having his opinion, but they could necessarily make a move right out from the front of the stadium. I don't think that's unreasonable.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting story there as well, as the series continues there with the Cubs and the Mets starting up tomorrow night, Tuesday, October 20th, around 8 p.m., I believe. And looking forward to that game as well.
Yeah, certainly. Sitting here waiting and waiting for the excitement to start rising up as we all get ready for that big game. And Rich, just a couple of notes before we do go. I don't know if we mentioned it, that Matt Williams was fired from the Washington Nationals. I don't know, forget if we talked about that in the last show, in case people want to know about that. And Don Mattingly has not been fired as the Dodgers manager as of yet. And this news came out today, and that was that Barry Zito has announced his retirement from baseball. So Zito sat out last year, came back this year, played AAA most of the year, came up towards the end of the year. He's announced that he is retiring from the game, and 15 years, parts of 15 years he's played. So Barry Zito gone.
Yeah, and he's been around the game for many years, almost as long as Bartolo Colon, who's 43 now. Interestingly, he's listed as a free agent for 2016. So we'll have to see what happens with him for 2016.
Yes, he is a free agent. And if I was the Mets general manager, I would try to sign him for a little less money than he got the last two contracts, the last 2 years, I should say. But nonetheless, make an offer to try to help to sign him, because he is a good influence in that clubhouse and with these pitchers, these young pitchers.
So we'll have to see what happens with that. And the big news the past year, this past season anyway, has been Cuba and its reigniting relationship with the United States, making it easier for a lot of the players there that used to have to defect and get to the country any which way they could. Now that's becoming easier for them to do. And Gary, you have our last story up of the night here about the Major League Baseball going to choose a team for a certain player, and that's a certain twist on things.
Well, that's what the report was, but that story has changed as they had an agreement apparently with the San Francisco Giants, but that broke down, and who swooped in but Theo Epstein and the Chicago Cubs, and they have signed this young outfielder, Eddie Julio Martinez, on Monday, and he signed for a signing bonus of $2.5 million. But that was the deal with the Giants, but the deal wasn't finalized, and he wanted more money, and the Cubs swooped in, offered $3 million, and landed him, and with tax penalties factored in, he'll cost about $6 million. And a deal between the Cubs and Martinez was reported on October 8th, but has now become official. The Cubs haven't announced it yet, but everything is pointing in that direction. He's a 20-year-old, and we'll see. But, Cubs are going big time into the Cuban players, and I guess maybe instead of Little Havana being in Miami, it's going to be in Chi-Town.
Yeah, and it looks like both teams have laid claim to him. We'll have to see how this turns out. A ruling is expected to see who ends up with him, and that seems to be an issue with a lot of these, especially Latin American ball players. Gary, they're so sought after that these teams are trying to snap them up at any cost.
Well, and I think the outcome of this is going to be an international draft at some point. It's going to come. I guess we'll have two drafts, or they'll have the free agent draft, the regular draft, the amateur draft, I mean, and an international draft. And that's probably the only way to do it at this point in time.
So we'll keep our eye on that story for you on MLB This Week. Thank everybody for tuning in, and don't forget, give us an email. Tell us where you listen from at talk@mlbthisweek.com. If you want to go over to our website, you can also send us a message right through the website there at mlbthisweek.com. Tune in on iTunes and over at Stitcher Radio for the show, as well as our own website where you can also see the video version of the show. And Gary, it's been another good one. We're getting ready for some more playoff baseball here, so good luck to the Mets, and I'm sure we're going to talk a lot more about them on our next show.
I certainly hope so. I hope that when we meet again, Rich, that the World Series is set, which means that the Royals and/or the Blue Jays. Well, I guess it would have to be the Royals at this point, and the Mets are meeting, but we'll see where the road takes us.
Yep, and best of luck to our Cubs, from our Cubs viewers and listeners as well, and our Midwest listeners. Best of luck to Kansas City and Chicago. We don't want to leave them out. Gary, you have a great week, and we'll talk again on the next show.
You too, Rich. See you then.